The note was slid under my dorm room door, typed on yellowed stationery that smelled faintly of camphor. No name, no signature, just an address. Langley Library, sub-basement C, and a time, 10 p.m. There was a final line, centered and bolded. If you accept, bring gloves. Compensation is generous. Do not speak to the books. I should have tossed it, but curiosity is a kind of hunger, and mine had gone unfed too long. Besides, I needed money. My teaching stipend barely covered rent, let alone food, and I'd already sold most of what was sellable. Langley was old in a way most buildings never get to be. Not just aged, but steeped. It was the first structure built on campus, and it looked it. A red brick leviathan with Gothic arches and stained glass windows that wept condensation no matter the season. Students whispered about it, said there were more basement levels than floors above ground. No one ever studied there. I went anyway. The entrance to sub-basement C was a long staircase found at the back of the rare books room. The air changed as I descended, damp, metallic, and thick, like hospital corridors at night. The staircase spiraled for so long, I lost track of the turns. My flashlight flickered twice. I kept going. At the bottom, a circular chamber unfolded around me. Iron shelves jutted from stone walls like ribs, each groaning under the weight of tomes in various states of decay. There was a desk in the center, lit by a single brass lamp, and a chair that looked recently used. No one was there to greet me. Basic instructions, just a logbook open to page dated 1979, the last name written in tight, frantic script. The ink had bled outward, like veins in the bruise. The books weren't shelved in any system I recognized. Languages shifted mid-title, one cover was slick with something like oil, but it didn't stain my glove. Another vibrated faintly when I got too close. I didn't touch that one. Nothing spoke that first night, not in words. But I felt watched, not just seen, but studied, measured. When I left at 2 a.m., I had the distinct sense I was forgetting something I never knew. The second night, something whispered my name from the far shelf. Not loud, not urgent, just enough to make me turn my head. I should have run. I made it halfway back upstairs before I stopped. One hand braced on the cold stone wall. My skin buzzed with static, and I realized I'd left my gloves on the desk. But it wasn't the gloves that made me turn around. It was the whisper. Not the sound of it, but the shape it leapt in my mind. Familiar, like a childhood lullaby sung in a dead language. Something about it felt correct, like it had always been waiting for me to hear it. And there was the money. Plain envelope had appeared on my pillow the next morning, thick with $20 bills and a note. Well done. So I went back the third time. This time, a book had moved. It was subtle, just a few inches closer to the edge of the shelf. But I knew I hadn't left it like that. Had no title, no markings on its weathered brown spine. But the air around it felt warmer, dense with intent. I told myself it was a trick of memory, cataloged a few other texts, and tried not to glance at it again. It didn't whisper, not that night. But when I passed it to leave, my fingers tingled, and I swear the cover flexed like something exhaling. The fourth night, book was open. A single page exposed, covered in tightly written script that shimmered slightly under the lamp. My name was on the top line. I stared at it for a long time. Hours, maybe? I didn't touch it, but I read. It wasn't a story. It was a memory. One that hadn't left my mind for years. Conversation with my sister a few nights before she died. Word for word. Dialogue was exact. down to the flicker of her eyelashes and the way she had gripped my wrist when I told her I couldn't come home that weekend. We hadn't spoken in days when she called. I remember glancing at the screen, seeing her name, and letting it go to voicemail. I was tired, buried in research, and I figured I'd call her back the next morning. But she left a message, her voice small and tight. She had been in a fight with her boyfriend. Minor, she said. Shaken but okay. She just wanted to hear my voice. That was the last thing I had of her. Voicemail I played 100 times until it felt like a curse. And this time, I pick up the pen. I wrote a single sentence. The kind of thing you think late at night, curled around guilt you can't quite name. I should have gone home that weekend. The ink shimmered briefly, then sank into the page like water soaking into dry earth. The book closed itself. I didn't remember walking home, only that I awoke in my bed, the covers neatly tucked around me. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream. Until my phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. Hey, nerd. Lunch tomorrow? Usual place? L. I stared at it for a long time. The contact thought it was my sister, Lauren, grinning with a milkshake in hand. The date on the message was current. The conversation thread went back weeks. Memes, shared playlists, mundane check-ins. I stumbled to my desk. A framed photo had changed. It was no longer just me and from our old house. Lauren stood beside me now, mid-laugh, our arms slung around each other. It worked. Somehow, impossibly, it worked. But something was wrong. My apartment looked the same, almost. A lamp I didn't recognize sat in the corner, its shade a strange chartreuse color. Would never have chosen. My thesis notes had shifted. Minor edits to titles, references to articles I hadn't read. And then there was the mirror. I caught my reflection brushing my teeth that morning and paused. My eyes looked clearer? Too clear. Like polished glass. And the slight freckle in my jaw, the one I'd had since childhood, was gone. I didn't feel different. Not exactly. But when I tried to recall the day Lauren died, the memory frayed at the edges. It no longer ended in that final phone call. It ended in a different conversation entirely. One I could only half remember. A visit, a hug, her laughter. I was losing the old version of my life. And my body had begun to forget with me. I didn't return the next night. I told myself I needed time to think, to understand what had happened. But really I was afraid of what more the archive could ask of me. And what I might be willing to give. Lauren was alive. She texted me like nothing had changed. We met for coffee and she handed me a book I'd apparently lent her months ago. She remembered things I didn't. Our timelines no longer matched. Still, I couldn't bring myself to tell her. How could I? Explain that she died once? That I'd rewritten her back into the world with a sentence and a pen that hadn't existed a week ago? 3 days passed before the envelope came again. No note this time, just cash. And a bookmark. One I recognized from my childhood, long since lost. Well, I knew where I'd last seen it. Tucked into Lauren's hospital journal. The one they gave me after. I went back. The archive greeted me like an exhale. The book was there to open. This time, the passage was simpler. I regret small enough to almost laugh at. A failed exam in my first year. one that had cost me a scholarship. I could still remember the panic attack halfway through, the blinding fluorescence of the lecture hall, the way I couldn't even remember my own name by the end. Under the memory, the question returned.
What would you change?
I hesitated, chewing my bottom lip until it split. This wasn't about loss. This was about pride, shame, about proving something to a version of myself I no longer liked. And yet, I wrote, I should have studied harder, slept the night before. I should have passed. The book closed itself. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the university's financial office. My scholarship had been reinstated retroactively. The name on the grant is one I didn't recognize, but the date stamp went back 3 years. And in my inbox, a congratulatory message from a professor I didn't remember taking a class with. Other things had shifted too. The layout of the campus cafe was different, sleeker. Someone had clearly remodeled it, though no one else seemed surprised. My dorm key no longer fit the door I remembered. My room had been moved 1 floor up, and the RA swore it had always been that way. A stack of books I'd never borrowed now sat on my shelf, filled with notes in my handwriting. My calendar is peppered with meetings and appointments I had no memory of attending. Yet I could recall their content if I focused hard enough, like I'd lived them in a dream. Lauren mentioned a mutual friend I didn't recognize. Someone she said I dated briefly? When I laughed and asked if she was joking, she just tilted her head, like I was teasing her. The world wasn't just rewriting itself to accommodate my edits. It was covering its tracks, tucking the old reality out of sight like a bad memory. And then came the change. It wasn't dramatic, nothing cinematic or grotesque. Just a lingering itch behind my left ear that turned out to be a patch of unnaturally smooth skin. When I checked the mirror, the area was hairless, almost waxen. I pressed it gently and felt no pain, just a strange, distant hum beneath the surface. I told myself it was stress, or a new shampoo, something rational, easy to dismiss. But that night, in the silence of my apartment, I kept reaching for that spot without meaning to. Like my body was reminding me something had shifted. Something was being overwritten. I didn't wait as long to return to the archive this time. The book was waiting, pages fluttering gently, even in the still air, like it had been restless in my absence. The next memory showed me wasn't painful, just wistful. An opportunity I let pass. Study abroad program I'd once been offered but turned down. At the time, it felt impossible, too expensive, too disruptive. I remembered standing in my professor's office, declining with a mix of embarrassment and regret. Under the memory, the question shimmered once more.
What would you change?
This time, I didn't hesitate. I wrote cancer almost before I knew what I was doing. I should have said yes. I should have gone. The ink shifted and bled into the page like usual, and the book snapped shut with a gentle thump. The next morning, I woke to postcards pinned above my desk. Photos of cobbled streets, foreign skylines, and my own handwriting on the backs. A train ticket stub lay on my nightstand. I recognized the station name, though I'd never been there. Later that day, I found a folder in my inbox labeled Exchange Year. Inside were photos of me with people I didn't recognize, smiling beside old statues and city fountains. I was wearing clothes I didn't own, but I had stories I didn't remember telling. And that night, I discovered I could understand fragments of a language I was certain I'd never studied. But the most unsettling part came when I looked at an old scar on my left hand. The thin line from when I'd broken a glass sophomore year. It was gone. Not faded. Gone. Like it had never happened at all. And yet, I was beginning to forget what had mattered. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the physical changes, but the shifts inside. Like someone was rearranging the furniture in my thoughts. I would start a sentence and forget where I was going, or walk into a room and forget why I'd entered. Not the normal kind of forgetfulness, but something deeper. Like the scaffolding of my memories had begun to crumble. Words slipped, names blurred. I called a professor by a name I didn't recognize, and she answered without correcting me. Worse still, I found myself rationalizing everything. Every change, every inconsistency, as though part of me wanted it to make sense. Like something was stitching logic over the rift. I began to dream in languages I didn't speak. I would wake with phrases on my tongue, meanings half formed, in the taste of sea salt in my mouth. The archive was inside me now. I could feel it. Not just the itch behind my ear or the hum beneath my skin, but something deeper, threading itself through my sense of self. I told myself I'd stop, but this was the last change I would make. I had come back to the archive that evening, unsure of what I was hoping to find. The air was thick with static. The book already waiting, its spine arched like it had been breathing in my absence. My phone buzzed. I didn't want to look at it, now while standing in the archive. But something in me knew it would matter. A missed call. A voicemail. A message from my neighbor back home. Her tone was hushed, brittle. My parents had been in a car accident. A head-on collision. No survivors. I stared at the screen, numb. I listened to the words again and again. When I looked back at the page, it had changed. The memory was already there. The flashing ambulance, shattered glass, a broken watch on asphalt, a mother's scarf caught in the door frame, a cop's mouth moving without sound. And below it,
Would you stop it?
my fingers hovered over the pen. I looked down at my hands. Pale, too pale. Veins shimmered faintly, metallic sheen beneath the skin. My nails had turned almost translucent. I flexed them and felt nothing. No tension, no warmth. This was the cost. Not just of changing the past, but of making the present obey. I wrote anyway. They left 10 minutes later. They took the side road. The ink vanished into the page like breath on glass. I waited, heart thudding, half expecting the book to reject it. But it didn't. It simply closed, quiet and final. I left the archive. My phone buzzed before I reached the stairs. A new voicemail. It was from my father. His voice was steady, casual, describing dinner plans for the weekend like nothing had happened. Like there hadn't been a wreck or a call, or the silence that followed. He sounded familiar, warm but distant, like a reporting of someone I used to know. But something felt wrong. I called back. We spoke for 20 minutes. They were alive. They were fine. But they talked to me like I was someone else. Asked about people I didn't know. Referred to events I didn't remember. And when I hung up, I realized I'd forgotten my mother's birthday. Not just the date. Everything about it. I checked my photo albums. She was there. But in every picture I looked off. Eyes slightly misaligned. A half smile that didn't reach the corners. In one photo, my arm disappeared behind her, where I should have rested on her shoulder. I had saved them, but the version of me that grew up with them, the one who knew their lives and belonged in their world, was gone. And I was what was left behind. I didn't stop going to the archive. Not to edit. Not anymore. I stopped bringing the pen. I returned for the quiet, for the weight of the shelves pressing down like a second gravity, for the steady rhythm of cataloging what had been buried. I logged books, assorted volumes by languages I no longer questioned how I understood. The rules didn't change, but the space did. The archive recognized me now. My second chair appeared beside the desk, though I never saw it arrive. The lamp never flickered. The air always held a faint scent of old paper and warm dust. My fingers no longer left prints. I didn't cast reflections in the brass lamp base. No one asked where I had been. I stopped dreaming. But I remembered more clearly than ever. One night, I opened the logbook and found my own name already printed, the date left blank. I picked up the pen for the last time, and I signed it.